I mean, how much of gender inequity has actually been fostered by the fact that alcohol is a significant piece of letting down your cognitive guard?
Yeah, I think quite a bit, and it's a problem, and I think people are rightly concerned about it. So for instance, I'm an academic. When we go to conferences, academic conferences, in-person conferences, we go in person, and we go in person because a lot of the real work is done outside of the formal sessions. A lot of this happens at the conference bar, after hours, and it's great in some ways. It's allowing a type of sociality to happen that wouldn't happen otherwise. The problem is it's all dudes, and women are quite understandably reluctant to enter these bro culture, especially late night gatherings. And as a result, they're getting frozen out of this. It's a big problem. I think the response to this by most organizations has been overkill. So the response has been, well, let's just make everything dry. You're not allowed to have these events anymore, or if you have them, you can't have alcohol at them. And I think that's because we don't see the functional benefits of alcohol. We look at alcohol just as kind of a public health problem. And at most on the positive side is fun. So if I'm head of HR and I see on one side potential lawsuits, sexual harassment, sexual assault, drunk driving, all these bad things, plus damage to people's livers, all this possible alcoholism, that's all on one side. On the other side, what is there? Fun. When you put it that way, fun is always going to lose. So what I'm trying to do in Drunk is point out that on the other side is not just fun. It's functional benefits. It's enhanced creativity. So we haven't talked about that, but one of the things alcohol does is free your mind up. You can start to think in a lateral way more easily and share your ideas with others in a freer way. So it's a crucial element, I think, in group creativity. You lose that as well. Now, you may see all those benefits and still say, yeah, we still don't want you guys drinking around the hotel bar late at night. We still don't want to have alcohol at our annual holiday party. And that's a perfectly justified decision, but it has to be made with all of the data. And I think right now, when it comes to making decisions about alcohol, whether to include it in our personal lives, whether to include it in our professional lives, we've been flying blind from an anthropological and from a scientific perspective. So I'm just trying to correct that and at least get all the data out there for decision makers. And then they can decide for their own organization, or you can decide as an individual yourself the extent to which you want to use alcohol in your life.
I just wonder to what extent we can really say that the impact of alcohol is so similar, so homogeneous on people when they take it. I mean, just from a pop culture perspective, you've got the angry drunk.
Angry drunks are just angry people who are finally getting to show their anger. What alcohol is doing is disinhibiting you. It's not creating new personality traits. It's not making you a different type of person. What it's doing is impairing your ability to conceal or repress what type of person you are. Kind of ugliness that can come out at a certain point of inebriation is you seeing what people really think or what they really feel. So I do think there's a lot of work that can be done. The last part of the book is about all the dangers of alcohol, and there are a lot of dangers. Historically, we've been drinking relatively weak beers and wines. So most cultures are drinking like 2 to 3% beer-like substances. Relatively recently, so last few hundred years, we've had access to distilled liquors, which are just wildly more powerful than the stuff we've had access to in the past. The other problem is we're drinking more alone. So again, historically, it's always been the case that drinking was a social act. It's something you did usually in a actually very tightly controlled ritual environment. And you didn't have private access to alcohol. The only time you had access to alcohol was in a public event where someone was timing the drinking. They were making toasts, they were passing around something. Everything was regulated. Other people were watching you. The tendency humans have to overindulge in something that makes us feel good, that hits our pleasure centers in our brain, was controlled and moderated by this ritual support. When you can go to a drive-through liquor store and load your SUV up with a couple cases of vodka and some firearms and Twinkies and drive home to your house in the suburbs and just have all that sitting around. That's historically unprecedented. So I think that I call this the problems of distillation and isolation. These two relatively new features of modernity have made alcohol a lot more dangerous. I think the pandemic has shown that when you make this really extreme, when people can't even go out and drink in a pub or a cafe, drinking gets really unhealthy and dangerous. Different cultures have healthier and less healthy attitudes and practices around alcohol. So-called Northern European cultures drink a lot of distilled spirits. They drink to get drunk. They kind of celebrate drunkenness. It's kind of manly to be really drunk. They tend to have really high levels of alcoholism and tend to not use alcohol in healthy ways. What anthropologists call Southern European cultures. So Italy is the one I'm most familiar with. They drink mostly wine and beers. It's always part of a meal. You're always doing it at the meal table, so for lunch or dinner. Kids get acculturated into it very early, so you give kids a little bit of wine that's watered down with their meal so they understand that it's just part of life. It's something people do. And public drunkenness is frowned upon. So if you're in Rome and you see some drunk people wandering around, they're tourists, they're not locals. So I think if you kind of figure out ways to emulate healthy drinking cultures, you're more likely to be able to get the benefits of alcohol and avoid all of at least most of the negative consequences.